have your attention, please? I think we will go ahead and get started. Okay. First of all, thank you all for coming. This is a requirement that we have for all of our sports seasons. If you're attending tonight and your son or daughter participates in another sport in the the winter or spring, then you don't have to come back to this type of presentation. As a matter of fact, there won't be another live one. We're going to tape this, and then the other parents for new athletes for the winter and the spring, they will be able to watch the video. But you're here live, so you got the best seat. Thank you for coming. This is our auditorium, our new auditorium. We're very proud of it. We have our nice curtain here, which is kind of one of our drawing cards for this school. And normally we do this meeting in the gym, but that's usually because we don't have any other place to meet. Well, we don't have that problem this year. So we can let volleyball finish up what they're doing, and we can still have the meeting here, and then they can come and join us later, which is what they normally end up doing anyway. So why are we having this meeting? What is the purpose? The purpose of the meeting is to set expectations for the school, for the coaches, for myself, so that you are aware of those. Issues that we have pertaining to sports usually revolve around information. I didn't know, no one told me, my child didn't tell me, and you'll get that a lot if you're teenagers like mine. You know, I'm lucky I'm the principal. I get the information, so I don't have to rely on my teenager. But we want to make sure that you're aware of what the expectations are of the coaches, of the players, and for you as parents, as it pertains to our sports program. This is the fall season. We have 5 sports: football, volleyball, cross country, tennis, and cheerleading. And I will be specifically addressing these concerns as it pertains to those sports. So the goal of our program is for our kids to have fun, compete, and hopefully win games. Why is that an expectation? Because in the States, if some of you are coming from the States just recently, there's a lot of pressure to win. Pressure on the coaches, pressure on the kids, and we don't do that in Dodge, or at least not at Perry. We want our kids to have fun, we want them to learn, we want them to grow. I frequently talk about, this is one school where a couple of years ago we had kids on the tennis team who had never picked up a racket. Never picked it up. Didn't know how to hold it. There are not many schools that would allow athletes like that to be on their team. But Perry's not like that. Again, that was a couple of years ago. We're growing. Our enrollment now is over 200. Back then we were about 130, 140. So we would basically take all comers, and we will probably continue to do that to a point when we grow and all of our teams will have JVs. We're not at that point now. But that's unique about Matthew C. Perry High School. And so the goal is not to push kids to win, and that's the main goal. That's not the thing. I do these interviews with seniors every year for graduation, and they all talk about their experiences with sports and activities. That's a great time for them. It helps them to bond and become a part of the fabric and the culture of Matthew C. Perry. And so we don't want to put stress on them. If you're not winning, we're not going to have that team. We don't do that. We want them to have fun. If they win, that's good. Now let me say this about that expectation. We're very competitive in many sports. We won baseball Far East last year. We won Division II football last year. And we placed in several other sports throughout the year. So even without that added pressure, we're still able to win games and win championships. Okay, so, and I'm a former coach. I love winning probably more than most. But I don't want our kids to feel like they're being pressed to win, and I don't want the coaches to feel that way either. Winning is a bonus. What they teach them is what we're more concerned about. Academics comes first. We do weekly grade checks. If you haven't already, you can get registered with GradeSpeed. If you're new, we'll send that information out to you if you're new to DoDEA. So you can register it so you can follow their grades. You can have your own account. The parents can have, each parent can have one. If you want to send one to grandmama back in the States, she can have one. So she can follow along with their grades. But we do weekly grade checks. If they have, they must have a 2.0 cumulative over their 7 classes and no more than 1 F. That means they can have 1 F. That's the DoDEA policy. It's not the school policy, but you're a parent. As a parent, me, if my child had an F, he would not be playing. That's me. But the policy is, and we will support that policy. If your child has 1 F, and that's all they have, and they have above a 2.0, they can participate. Okay? We have a procedure in place where the students who have, who aren't eligible, get some support at the school through Opportunity Hall, and most coaches will sort of watch them and pay a little extra attention. And they will also provide opportunity for them to study. Now, if they're in a hole, so they can't come every week and say, Coach, I didn't study for the chemistry test. I need some more time off from practice. And that happens every week. And they're not failing the class. You just need to do more time management or a better job of time management. But they must maintain that academic standard. After school detention or Saturday detention takes precedence over practice and games. So if your son or daughter is assigned a detention for something they did, a violation of a school policy, or Saturday detention, if there's a game or practice, they don't get to go to the game and skip that detention. They must serve that detention. Okay? And we get them asking every time, well, you know, we have practice and this is the Thursday before the big game on tomorrow. And that's not going to be an excuse. Okay? When I say academics comes first, academics comes first. And if you have behavioral issues or other issues that causes you to have a Saturday detention, then you will serve that first, and then you regain your full rights for practices and games. SAT, ACT. If your son or daughter is a junior, or even some of the seniors that haven't taken the SAT or didn't take it as juniors, please be mindful of those dates. We will start putting information out about that. We're already pretty close to the dates for October. The first SAT date is the 7th of October. I'm sorry I don't have the registration deadline, but it's usually several weeks prior to that test. And the first ACT test is on the 9th of September. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because, again, as a parent, I want my child to go to college. And most of our student athletes participate in 3 seasons. They're not going to get a weekend off where we're not competing, either at home or away. And so you have to make a decision at what point do you want your son or daughter to miss a game or weekend. That has to happen if you want them to go to college. There are no, I mean, from the time we start in August until June, that's the only time the SATs are offered. And so look at the schedule, pick a date for SAT. If they're not involved in a season, then maybe you have time to do it and they don't miss any games. But if they're involved in all 3 seasons, in the fall, the winter, and the spring, they're going to have to make a decision as to what games they miss. For me, it's an easy decision because I'm pretty sure my son is not going to be a pro athlete. So, and even if he was, he still would have to take the SAT or the ACT. Okay, so make that decision, follow that, let the coaches know. So, you know, if they're not going to be there, you know, maybe your son or daughter is an integral part of the team. The coach needs to know if they're not going to be there because they're taking the SAT or ACT. All right, and we encourage that. The athletic policy, you should probably have already signed it. And we're going to ask to have you sign it again because there was something that happened towards the end of last year that we need to address, and it didn't make it into into the athletic policy as an amendment or an addition. And that is, if you were here last year, you know that in the spring, I think it was, I started a policy where the students were not allowed to go into the exchange by themselves because we had probably more incidents of theft and shoplifting last year than we have ever had in the 4 years that I have been here previously. And my way to stop that was we were on everybody's radar at every base. When Matthew C. Perry showed up at a base, they started, the security people, and they told me this. There is MC Perry. They took their cameras and they focused in on the MC Perry students because that was an expectation because of history. Okay, so I took that, I don't want to say drastic step, but it was kind of a hard step because I usually talk about how impressed I am with the behavior of our students, and I am. I was just disappointed that we had those types of incidents. But in the spring, I met with, right before school ended, I met with some of the captains, and I wanted to talk about how we can not penalize everyone, but have something in place that would have some teeth in it that would discourage students from going to other bases or exchanges and being involved in things like that. So what we came up with, myself and the captains who would be coming forth this year, was that if an incident happened, and I'm specifically talking about the theft thing now, but there are other things like drinking, smoking, curfew violation, drug or alcohol possession or use, and or engaging in inappropriate, well, not inappropriate, engaging in sexual activity. Those are the major things that would cause a problem and jeopardize their standing on a team. So if any of those happen, what we came up with is that it would result in a dismissal from the team for the rest of the season if it happened within the first 6 weeks of the season. Okay, so we have games starting, competition starting this weekend. So this is the first week, essentially. So if anything happens between now and the first 6 weeks of school that violates the athletic code, your son or daughter will be suspended from the team for the remainder of the season. After those 6 weeks, if it happens, then your son or daughter will be suspended for the remainder of what's left of that season and into the next season, equaling 6 weeks. So if it was the last week, if it happened at Far East, they would be suspended for the first 6 weeks of the next season that they participate in. Okay, that they participate in. Because if they don't participate in a winter sport, their next season is spring, if they participate in a spring sport. So that will be added to the handbook. Some of the students thought it was a little harsh, the way we had it, where they were dismissed, and some parents thought it wasn't harsh enough. If someone got involved in an incident the last, say, 2 or 3 weeks of that season, and they were suspended for those 2 or 3 weeks, and then they were eligible, because the old policy said you're suspended for the rest of that season, but then you're eligible for the next season. So if that season only had 3 weeks left, you would be suspended, but then you could participate in the next one. So the students felt it was a pretty fair compromise to say 6 weeks, and then it extends into the next one for that total. Okay? Hazing. It hadn't been a big problem. It hadn't been a problem at Perry at all, but I guess it has been a problem in some schools in the Pacific where students are, the difference in hazing is we go to a Far East and everybody decides that they're going to dye their hair blonde. Okay, I think some of the cross-country guys did that last year. Great, but no one should force you to do that if you don't want to. Okay, and no one should put pressure on you to say you're not a part of the team if you don't do it. All right? So that's the definition of hazing. If you're forcing someone to do something, or you're constantly harassing them, and that's why I spoke to the coaches about having supervision in the locker rooms before practice and after practice, so that the younger kids aren't being hazed. And let me say this, if your son is a freshman and they ask him to carry the football equipment, that is not really considered hazing. That's just part of the growth process, okay? Now, if your son is being asked to take all of the helmets home and polish them up and shine them, that's probably a little bit excessive, okay? But there's some things that are within the spirit of team building, and you teach the younger kids how to assimilate into the team. The difference is when unwanted, unwelcome, and very unpopular actions are required of them, and that causes a problem, okay? The classic is shaving their heads, beards, paddling, spankings, and all these other little weird things they find on YouTube. But that's not to be tolerated. If your son or daughter reports that to you, and it's possible a coach may not know that it's happening, but if your son or daughter reports something to you that sounds like, well, they shouldn't be doing that to you, please talk to the coach and let him know right away. Well, coach, is this normal? Is that supposed to happen? And if they say no, they should address it. But if your son or daughter says that it's still happening, then you let me know. Well, I'm sorry, we follow the chain of command. So you talk to the coach, you talk to Mr. Williams, the athletic director, and then you come to me. Hopefully it won't get to me. Normally they can resolve those issues at that lowest level. But we don't want our students to feel like they're being hazed or separated or targeted or picked on. We don't, like I said, at Perry, my experience has not been that, but that's something that our area wanted us to say to all the parents. So that's just for you to know. Your coaches should, and you should meet with them soon, if you haven't already, establish lettering policies. I know lettering when I went to school 400 years ago was a big deal. To these kids, it's not as big a deal. Because when I went to school and when many of you went to school, we had like Letterman jackets or Letterman sweaters, and you could put the letter on it. They don't have those things, so the letter means nothing because they don't have anything to put it on. They hang it on the wall or something. But they should earn them, and the coach should tell you what your son or daughter needs to do for his or her team in order to earn a letter. And when I say letter, that could be a bar or pen as well. The coaches or volunteers are not authorized to put their hands on athletes for discipline. They have to touch them, in some cases, to coach them. If you're coaching the defensive line, you have to get down and you have to bend their knees and get their head pointed up in the right direction. If you're doing cheerleading, you may need to set for them. So you have to touch them physically to coach them. And what the touching that I'm talking about is in discipline. And so if, again, I'll go back to my own high school experiences. When I didn't do something right, my football coach would just, his hand was pretty hard. He would just hit me in the helmet. Now we say that's causing a concussion. Maybe I suffer from that some days, I don't know. But we can't do that to kids anymore, okay? So if you hear your son or daughter saying that in order to correct them, a coach touched them in a disciplinary manner, to hit, punch, pull, push, if they're not doing that as far as instruction, if they're doing it for discipline, that should not be happening, okay? And if it does happen again, follow your chain of command. If it's very serious, skip the chain, come straight to me, okay? And that pertains to all things. If it's very serious, skip the chain, come straight to me. All right, the coaches should inform you of all pertinent information regarding trips within 24 hours of their departure. Okay, so if they're leaving for Sasebo on Friday at 8 o'clock, and that's not made up, you should have information about Sasebo, about the trip, when they're leaving, how long it probably would take them to get there, where they're staying, the coach's contact information, what type of money do they need? And if you don't know, if we're going to another U.S. base, they need dollars. Or if they have an ATM card, because every base has ATM machines, just make sure they have a card, okay? But they don't need $300. It's not a shopping trip, okay? It's a sports trip. They may get to go to the exchange, but the expectation is not for them to go and buy, you know, Gucci bags, and that's not what they're supposed to be doing. And it also lessens the chance that something will be misplaced or stolen. They really just need spending money for meals. That's it. You know, and if they have something at that Super NEX exchange that we don't have at MCX, and you see it in the sales paper, and you want them to pick that up when they're down there, fine. But again, the less things they have, the less they have to keep up with. And that's always a good rule. But the coach should provide you that information. If they're traveling, they need some money for the rest stops on the bus. When the bus stops at these places, if they're going to Tokyo, they will have a meal. One of those stops will count as a meal stop. And so they need enough yen to purchase food at that. Again, they don't need 20,000 yen. They're not going to eat that much food. Okay? So, you know, be judicious, but you know, I always tell my son, I give him a certain amount. If he has any left over, he never tells me. I just go in his wallet and get my money back. But if they have, if you give them 2,000 yen, 3,000 yen, that's probably enough for them to eat going and coming back. Depending, and you know your child, if they eat a lot, you want to give them a little bit more. If they don't require a lot of food, then you don't have to give them as much. But, you know, you judge that as you see fit. But the coaches should provide that information to you. If we're going to another military base in Sasebo, Tokyo, including Yokota, Yokosuka, Zama, and Atsugi, or Misawa, which is Edwin. If we're going to any of those bases, they will need dollars as well. If we're only going to some of the WJAA, Western Japan Athletic Association schools in Osaka or Kobe or Nagoya, that's yen only. They don't take dollars there. So just watch the schedule so that you know. And volleyball and tennis, they are normally involved in the WJA competitions, but football and cross country won't be this season. Students who are sick during the school day cannot attend practices and games. If they're too sick to be in school, they're too sick to practice. Okay, that's a simple rule. I was told today by the nurse, I guess there were some instances last year where parents tried to give kids medication even though they were sick, or they wouldn't come pick them up even though they were sick so they could go to practice or play in a game. Don't do that. The games that we play, it's important that we feel the team, but your child's health and safety is more important than any game or practice that we have. Okay? If they're sick, they should not be participating. Take them home, let them get well, and then, you know, we'll gladly accept them back. But don't leave them at school when you know they're sick so they can go to a game or go to practice. That's not wise. Okay? Students who are injured should report to the coach if they're injured. Now, if they're injured and they, as we say in the coaching profession, if they shake it off and it's not a permanent lingering kind of thing and they don't need to go to a doctor, then that's fine. But if they have to go to a doctor because of the injury, and sometimes that happens. It may start out as a small thing and then it doesn't get better. That little tweak in my knee, it just happened during the game and I felt better when I got up the next day, but the day after it started hurting again and it won't stop. Then at that point you need to take them to a doctor and get it checked. Okay? We want you to report it when you take them to a doctor, when they seek medical care. Now if you are a doctor, let us know anyway. Okay? Because we have to do an accident report for everything that happens when they're under our care, whether it's at practice or game. All right? Head injuries. You know, with all the stuff that's going on with the NFL now, you know, there's a lot of concern about what kind of trauma is going on with our kids. And again, back in my day, I didn't know I was probably getting concussion when I was slapped upside the head playing football. None of us did. We all loved it, you know. But the reality is, damage could have been done to us that we weren't aware. Well, we're better now in science and technology, so we understand those things. So if your child goes to practice, says they have a headache, especially if they're in a contact sport, or even if they're not in, say, football, and they run into somebody, like in a tennis practice or something, head first, and they're fine for a while, and then they start having headaches, and the headaches do not go away. Again, you want to take them to be seen by a doctor, because that's not normal. You want to take care of that, and you want to err on the side of caution, and we want you to do that as well. Our coaches are now required to take a class on concussion protocol, and I think that's a good thing. For years, like I said, my old coach, he obviously never had that class because he was just abusing us in a nice Southern football manner. But today, we take more precaution with the health and safety of our kids. Okay, so parents, you monitor that because you see them. You know if they're complaining and you're giving them basic medication and it's not helping and it's only lingering. If you have a desire for your son or daughter to play sports at the next level, NCAA, whether Division I, II, or III, you must have them registered in the NCAA clearinghouse. And we can give you the website for that. We are a registered member. That's important because the coaches should not contact the Division I and I think Division II level. Division III, I don't think they have that restriction. So you won't be able to have a coach that you might know or a coach at a school that you want your child to attend respond to you. They can't. And there's a law for that, unless you're registered in the clearinghouse. If you're registered, they can. Okay, so if you want more information about that, let us know. And normally that's for your juniors and seniors, and occasionally it's for some freshmen and sophomores. Communicate with your coach well in advance for any need for tardiness from practice or missing practice. And for the players, if there's a meeting that they have with a teacher after school, again, you will have my support anytime your child is trying to do better academically. Okay? Now, that's the good side. The other side of that is it may cost them because they're not at practice. Okay? But I would rather my child be sound academically in their class as opposed to being the starting left guard. Okay? If you have to go through a couple of games or a couple more weeks to regain your starting spot because you needed to get some extra help in U.S. history, that's a sacrifice that's worthy for that cause. But parents, if you're going to have your child out for some reason, and then the athlete should know, because when I was coaching, I didn't accept the excuse for students saying, well, I'm going to be out today, so I'm going to send Tommy, go tell Coach Brown I'm not going to be in today. I'm not going to practice. I didn't accept that, and most coaches won't either. So if the student is at school, physically at school, and cannot be at practice, it's their responsibility to go and tell the coach if they know. Now, if they leave school early, if they get sick or something comes up that's family related, and they go home, then contact the coach at your earliest convenience. But if the student can talk to the coach before leaving school, they should do that. Okay? Most coaches or teams will have some sort of Facebook or Instagram or some kind of, what I call it, instant book or Facegram. They have some of those things where they have a team page where they communicate. Use that also as a means to communicate. But the simplest, most direct line is to just pick up the phone and call them. All right? try that. The parents who travel to areas with their with the team, like cross country is going to Sasebo this weekend. If you travel to Sasebo, Kobe, Tokyo, or even if you are able to go to Masao, your son or daughter must ride with the team. Okay, you can't take them there on your own. That's the DODEA policy that we have. You can, however, when it's over, you can, if you want to stay in the area for that weekend and then come back later, you can do that. You just need to let the coach know, hey coach, my son runs cross country when we go to Sasebo, and I'm going to do that this weekend. I'll just say, hey coach, we're going to keep him and we'll just come back later. Just let him know. You can't take someone else's child. Okay? Hey, I'm gonna take my son, I'm gonna get those three right there, and we're gonna, no, you can take yours. If those parents will write a letter and call the coach, giving their permission, then you can do that. But you just can't say, well, they live right in my neighborhood, I'll just take them with me. Can't do that. All right? Only your child or your child and other teammates with a letter and a phone call from that parent. Okay? Cleaning up after the areas, clean up your areas after games and matches. We don't have a contract. I try to encourage the coaches, especially for our home matches, to remind the fans to kind of clean up after themselves. But if they don't do that, then it falls on the players. Okay, and the expectation is if the gym or the field, well, let's use the gym, because the example is, it's considered a classroom. The gym is a classroom for the PE teacher. And so we can't leave his classroom in a condition less than standard, because we had a competition there. And there is no cleaning contract for that. So if we can't get parents to self-police or spectators to self-police, then the expectation is that the athletes will do it. Okay? Why isn't my child playing, coach? Okay. That decision rests with the coach. And the best way to understand why your son or daughter is not playing or is not starting, you know, I love tennis and I love wrestling because those are easy sports. You just beat that person. There's no subjectivity. It's all about, or objectivity. It's all about if you beat them. Those are easy. But, you know, in everybody's mind, my son is the best quarterback ever. I don't care why y'all have this guy down here. He's not as good as my son. My son is the best, my daughter is the best hitter on the volleyball team. Well, that's an opinion that you have, and there's not really a quantitative way to measure that like there is in wrestling or tennis, or even cross country. So the best way to determine that is go to practices. Look at how your child is in relation to the other athletes that he or she is vying for that spot. Okay, that's the best way. Because we all think our child is the greatest and should be starting, and you're stopping us from getting this scholarship to UCLA, and because they're not starting, that scholarship is not going to happen. Go to the practices. Make time to go to the practice. Talk to the coach. Your athlete, your son or daughter, should also be talking to the coach. What can I do better? Get some extra work, and you get better. The conduct of the coaches. Our coaches should display appropriate conduct that is above reproach at all times. They are the example to our athletes. And if they are out there swearing and causing fights and disturbances, that breeds down to the players and to the team. Now, I'm just saying this just because I just need to say it. We haven't had that. And if we ever did have it, I wouldn't tolerate it. I look out here and I see some of you, and you've been here for years, and I'll mention, I won't now because some of them might be with us now. But we had a situation in a basketball game several years ago where the coach just was out of control and he just walked off the court and took his team with him. That would only happen once for a coach a period. Even if we're losing, even if you don't like the calls, you're not going to like the calls. You know, I joke with our officials here and I tell them, well, you guys are really not that good. But I tell the coaches here, you still have to work through that. You can't control what they call. All right, so you can't lose your bearing and become a distraction, and then your athletes and your team follows you. They're supposed to follow you. That's why you're the coach. Okay? So the conduct of the coaches must be above reproach at all times. And that includes I don't like the bad calls. You're going to get the bad calls. It doesn't matter. Just keep playing. When I coached basketball, I made it a point to be the worst referee I could be. Because when we get in a game and they say, oh, this referee is terrible. And I said, who's the worst referee you know? You are, coach. Thank you. Now let's play. You work every day with the worst referee. We get in here, this guy is a piece of cake. And I did that on purpose. That was my way to show them that you can overcome all those bad calls. And it doesn't have to break you mentally. Inappropriate conduct at Far East events. We talked about violating the code of conduct earlier. There is and I explained this to the kids last year when we met. You get multiple consequences for conduct issues. You get some at school for your standing on the team, but depending on what it is, it may also equate to a suspension from school. It may also lead to the IG being involved here on the base. It may also involve security and PMO on the other base that it happens. And it could also involve, depending on the parent and their belief, a consequence at home. So one bad decision by a student, by an athlete, could have 5 different consequences. They don't think about things like that, but that's what happens, okay? And in a couple of the incidents we had last year, that's exactly what happened. They had all these different consequences stacked, and they were all appropriate because everybody took a little bite. And because they're student athlete, they're disciplined as an athlete and they're disciplined as a student. Okay? And we're done with it. Now what the base in your coda does, or what the base here does, or what a parent does, that's beyond our control. That's on you and that's on those other entities. So please stress that to your son or daughter. All right, not all students or not all athletes will go to Far East. The Far East numbers are different. Then we can have a team as large as we want, but for Far East, in order to have a level playing field, the numbers are predetermined. For football is 23, and volleyball is 9, and tennis is 8, 4 boys, 4 girls. What did I miss? Cross country is 10. Every one of those teams have more players on it than that, but they can't all go to Far East. Okay? So if your son or daughter is fortunate enough to be selected for Far East, then there is a video that you have to watch that's separate from this, and it talks just about their week at Far East. That's a requirement also. So keep in mind that'll come later in the fall season. But all parents must watch that video as well. Athletes cannot travel via alternate means. I think I mentioned this a little bit. So a parent can't take them to Sasebo this weekend and say, okay, now we're going to be involved in this sport. That's only for the students who ride on the bus. Circuitous travel. This is a term that DODEA uses, and it references being able to go to multiple events. Okay, usually it involves sports and it involves a Far East activity. So let's say the tennis team is going to Yokota. But Yokota is also hosting Far East, let's say drama. It's not during that time, but let's say that. During that, the next week. If your son or daughter leaves here as a tennis player headed to Yokota, they must come back here on that return trip before they're eligible to go to Yokota for Far East drama. Okay? So they can't go there and stay and then participate in another activity. They have to come back here. All right? That's called circuitous travel. You go to A, from A to B, and from B back to A. Then you get to go from A again to wherever that other location is. All right? Chain of command, I talked about going through the coach, assistant coach. Again, you have to determine the level of seriousness. I mean, if it's, you know, I don't like how that coach said something to my child, then talk to that coach. Okay, if it's, you know, I think, you know, my son has a concussion because the coach popped him in the head. Bring that to me. We don't want to follow the chain of command there. That's a little more serious. Okay? Parents are welcome at practices as long as there are no disruptions. So you can go to practice, you can cheer on your son or daughter. And I hate to say this, but several years ago we had parents going to practices and like booing other players who were competing for similar positions that their child was interested in. So that takes it beyond what's acceptable. So you can go, just don't be a distraction. Pay special attention to the individual rules and policies of each team because they're different. This is the same spiel, but each coach has their own policy about what they wear, the dress code for travel and things like that. That's specific to a team, all right? And, you know, you have to follow that policy as well for that coach and for that team. Night supervision on away trips. Okay, so the expectation is when we leave, well, I always do this. Before I say this, how many, raise your hand and be honest, how many of you do hourly bed checks at night for your teenagers? You check every hour to make sure that they're in the bed sleeping. You do?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you're the first one. We have to talk. We have to talk.
I still do.
Okay, that's different. The point I'm making is, when we travel, we don't do those either. Why? Because we shouldn't have to. When they go to a hotel, whether it's a lodge or whatever inn where we're staying, even sometimes a gym or, you know, in the case of Sasebo, maybe even a library where they're sleeping. They're given a time to be in, they're given a lights out, and then they have a bed check. After that bed check, if we do 100% accountability, the responsibility of the coach is over at that time. Okay? They should go back to bed or back to their room and they should go to bed. Okay? Because they should be getting up earlier than your son or daughter. So they should get as much rest as they possibly can. And so the question that is posed to some of the coaches sometimes is when we have inappropriate behavior that happens at 3 in the morning, and PMO or security or wherever base that you're on, whichever law enforcement agency is responsible, when they bring that child to that coach's room and we deal with it, we come back here and then the parent comes to me and says, where was the coach? At 3 o'clock in the morning, the coach was asleep. That's where the coach should have been. We don't do hourly checks. If we have a concern about whether or not we need to do hourly checks about your son or daughter should not go on that trip. Okay? And that's just a fact. So they're supposed to be responsible for themselves. And if they say if we go in and we do a bed check, they don't have to be asleep. We can't just say, and I wish I had that power, but I don't either. And if you do, share it with me, that you can go in the room and say, go to sleep, and they're all asleep. If you have that power, please share that with me. But that doesn't work. We'll give them In the room, lights out, in the bed, bed check. When they go to sleep, at that point, it's kind of on them, okay? But they are expected to perform. You know, we tell them, don't stay up all night trying to, don't let them take the video games, because they're under the covers playing games at 3 and 4 in the morning, and they get up to have a 6 o'clock game, and then they're all tired, because they just went to bed because they couldn't clear that last level. You know, but, you know, if you give it to them and the coaches don't say anything, that's, just monitor that. But we want the coaches to get a good night's sleep. So they're not going to sit out in the hallway. They're not going to put pennies in the door. They're not going to put tape on the windows. We're not doing any of that stuff. We're on the honor system. If you violate that honor, you will not be going on another trip. Okay? And that's the way it should be. That's a high expectation, and we expect that from them. So the expectations for the players, we want them to be on their best behavior. They represent us in the best light possible, and we get out there and we compete. And if we lose, we try harder the next time. The expectation for the coaches, they will not inappropriately put their hands on your child. They will not speak to them in a demeaning or degrading manner. And they will encourage them and help them to grow as a player. And the expectation for the parent, communicate with the coach. If you have concerns because your child is telling you these things over the dinner table, go back to the coach and say, hey coach, you know, I was talking to my son and he said this, this, and this. You know, don't send an ICE comment to the director of DODEA anonymously because of a conversation you had at dinner with your son or daughter about what happened at practice yesterday. Go to the coach and say, hey, what's going on? Is this true? Did that actually happen? And I'm sure they'll be happy to address your question. Okay? But those are the expectations as I have outlined them. And I will give you an opportunity right now if you have any questions about something that I didn't cover that you want me to go into more detail about, or you have any questions generally speaking. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned if the child has to miss school, they can't participate in practice. If they have to be checked out for an appointment and they return to school, or if it's an end of the day appointment, can they return for practice?
The rule is a half a day. They can't miss more than half a day. And I'm glad you asked that question because there was some more information I needed to share about that. In our environment here, especially for civilians, sometimes we can't get on base here at the clinic, and we don't have a high priority. So we may have to go to Hiroshima or someplace else to a doctor to get treatment. If you have to go to Hiroshima for a medical appointment, it's probably going to be an all-day thing. That I understand that. But if you tell me I went to the clinic here and we were there all day, you're not going to be at the clinic all day. Because if you need that type of treatment, they're going to send you out in town. And then you will tell me, well, we went out in town, we went to the clinic, and then we had to go out in town. That makes sense. But they don't do just all day sit around. We'll see, you come in at 8 and we'll release you at 4. That doesn't happen at our clinic. And so in that case, if you're specific about what happened, I don't need to know, you know, hopefully if it's just a sickness or something, you can share that. But, you know, I don't need to know diagnosis and all that stuff, that medical information. But let me know if there's an extenuating circumstance. You had a long appointment, maybe the doctor that was scheduled to see your son or daughter couldn't come in and somebody else was supposed to come in and you were there waiting. But again, I still don't think that would take all day. It's possible that it could. But, you know, I would say get some documentation from the staff people there. And if you have that, it won't be a problem. Okay? But I do realize we can't just go down the street and get an appointment and just come right back. Sometimes you have to go other places. If you go out in town, you have to wait for a translator. You know, all kinds of things happen. But just keep us informed and we'll work with you. But what we want to avoid is, Mom, I don't feel good today. I'm not going in. And then they stay home. And then, you know, around lunchtime, oh, I feel good now. I'm good. And then we're leaving at 3:30. You know, we want to avoid that kind of stuff. All right? But you know your child. Help us and we'll help you. And one last thing regarding practices. Sometimes don't use discipline at home and mix that with participation on the team. Okay, Johnny didn't take out the trash. So, Johnny, you're not going to practice today. All right? I'm sure every coach in here will give Johnny some extra work because Johnny's not doing what they're supposed to do at home. I didn't mind doing it. I coached basketball. My class was on the second floor. There were 2 water fountains. That was my landmark. It was not uncommon for a teacher to tell me that my kids didn't have their assignments done, and I make them run suicides in the hallway. And I didn't have that problem anymore. And your coaches can do that for you. Now, I'm not saying you don't discipline your child. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying before you allow them to miss practices and we come to depend on them and we can't, because Johnny is going to be Johnny. If Johnny didn't take out the trash this week, he may not take it out again next week or the week after that. And if he takes it out anytime beyond that point, that's a good week. Okay? So what I'm saying is, if it's a repetitive thing and you're trying to work with the coach and you're not seeing a change, yeah, go ahead and yank it. He or she deserve to do what you require them to do at your home. Okay? But what I'm saying is, initially, let us try to work with you to help you with that. Because I'm sure, you know, football is the worst one because they got all those pads on. You can have them going up and down and they will get tired and they won't do that again. Track is easy, or cross country, you just make them run a few more miles. Yeah, I'll make sure I take that trash out. Okay, I'll make my bed up. I'll take the dog out. Whatever it is they're not doing at home. Give us a chance to work with you. Okay? But by all means, please understand that if you are very stringent about your house rules and they break them, you follow your house rules. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What about children who have jobs, if they may have to leave like 30 minutes early or something like that to get to work?
Children who have jobs and want to leave early to get to work. I'll leave that up to the coaches. They're missing practice. That's technically not excused. But again, that you have to make a family decision. If the coach is okay and they allow that, then that's a coach's decision. But I will talk to the coach first to find out where they stand on that. But we don't have an official school policy on athletes who also work. Next question? No? Everybody happy? Yeah?